Hi, this is Holly of Holly's Soapmaking. This video is about a soap I made recently using a high percentage of cocoa butter. Ever since I made that 60% shea butter soap that I like so much, I've wanted to try out a similar soap using cocoa butter. I'll share the recipe at the end of this video entered into a soap calculator, and all of the other information will be listed in the description box below. Soap making involves the use of sodium hydroxide, or lye, so be sure to learn and follow lye-safe handling procedures during the entire soap making process. When mixing the lye, always add the sodium hydroxide to the water, not the other way around. Also be sure to work in a well-ventilated area and never stand over the container or breathe any of the fumes. For my liquid requirement, I used half frozen and half refrigerated distilled water. Using frozen helps keep the fumes to a minimum, so whenever I can remember to freeze some distilled water, I like to make my lye this way. I added the sodium hydroxide about a third at a time and continued to stir until I was sure it had all dissolved. Once the sodium hydroxide had dissolved completely, I set the lye aside to cool and weighed out the oils and butters. "60% cocoa butter really is a lot of cocoa butter for a soap recipe. The high percentage makes the cost of this soap a bit more than a normal batch. I will say that I do really like this soap, but the 60% shea butter soap is still my favorite and the more cost-effective of the two for sure. I continued to blend the soap until reaching a light medium trace, which actually took longer than I expected for a recipe with such a high percentage of solid oils and butters. I alternated between blending and stirring for about 3 minutes altogether, and it took an additional 15 minutes in the mold for it to set up enough for me to contour the top. I did oven process the soap to make sure it gelled completely. The next morning, the soap was already extremely hard, so I unmolded and cut it immediately. It had a very strong cocoa butter scent, but much like the Shea butter soap, that has slowly faded over the last 5 weeks to a very light scent. Since this was a cold process soap, I set the type of lye to sodium hydroxide, or NaOH. My recipe oil weight was 1,000 grams. My lye concentration was set to 33%, which means my lye solution consisted of 33% sodium hydroxide and 67% distilled water. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know I normally use a 35% lye concentration, but this was a new recipe with a very high percentage of solid oils and butters, so I wanted to use a bit more water the first time I made it. If I make this soap again, I'll definitely use 35% instead. I left the superfat at 5% and set the fragrance usage rate to 0 since this was an unscented soap. Once you have everything entered, you just select to calculate the recipe, then to view or print it. SoapCalc will give you a really nice listing of all of your ingredients, including the amount of sodium hydroxide required to saponify your oils. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found something useful here to help you in your soap making.